The glass hit the floor before anyone could stop it. One moment Mara Ellis was moving through the crowd, tray in her left hand, 5 crystal flutes of champagne, perfectly balanced, not a single tremor. Then her elbow caught the edge of Isabella Volkov's sleeve, and the champagne went everywhere. It spread across the front of Isabella's ivory gown in a slow golden stain, champagne soaking into expensive silk, visible to every person in the room. The quartet stopped playing. Nobody told them to. It just happened. The way all sound stops when something irreversible has been done. Isabella Volkov stood at the center of the penthouse ballroom, 52 floors above the city, surrounded by politicians, CEOs, and the kind of men who send other men to handle problems they don't want to touch themselves. She was 51 years old, and she had spent every single one of those years learning how to make people feel exactly the size she needed them to be. Her dark hair was pinned back without a single strand out of place. Diamond earrings, small and real and deliberately understated, the way only genuinely expensive things can afford to be. She was not a beautiful woman in the conventional sense. She was something far more dangerous than that. She was a woman who had mastered the art of being looked at. And right now, she was standing in front of 130 guests with a champagne stain spreading across her chest. She didn't scream. That was the first thing people noticed. No shriek, no gasp, no dramatic reaction. Isabella simply looked down at the stain, then she looked up at Mara, and she smiled. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh, sweetheart." Mara Ellis stood very still. She was 34 years old, medium height, the kind of build that looked unremarkable until you noticed the way she carried herself. Weight distributed evenly, shoulders relaxed but not slack, hands loose at her sides. Her catering uniform was pressed. Her dark hair was pulled back under a clip. Her face, in that moment, was completely unreadable. Not blank. Unreadable. There is a difference. Blank is absence. Unreadable is a door that has been locked from the inside deliberately. "I'm sorry," Myra said. Her voice was level. "I'll cover the cleaning cost." Isabella tilted her head, like she had heard something amusing but didn't want to dignify it with a real laugh. She took a champagne flute from the nearest waiter without even looking at him and turned to face the room, turning Mara into a backdrop, which was itself a kind of cruelty. "Do you know what I love about evenings like this?" Isabella said. Her voice carried easily across the room. "You see the true character of people, the ones who rise to the occasion, and the ones," she paused just long enough, "who simply don't belong in the spaces they've wandered into." A few guests chuckled, nervously, the way people laugh when they're afraid of being next. Myra didn't move. Isabella walked a slow half-circle around her, not threatening, theatrical. "You've been working events at this firm for how long?" 3 months, Mara said. 3 months. Isabella repeated it like a confession of incompetence. "And in 3 months, you never learned how to walk through a room without destroying things that don't belong to you." "It was an accident," Mara said. "I've already offered to cover it." "Accidents," Isabella interrupted gently, "are what happen when people operate beyond their capability." She paused beside a side table, and with one elegant finger, she pushed a crystal glass off the edge. It hit the marble floor and exploded. The room flinched. Mara didn't. "Clean that up," Isabella said. "Properly. On your knees." There was a moment, one single suspended moment, where the entire room held its breath. Mara looked at the broken glass. Then she crouched down, picked up the larger pieces first, the way someone trained to do it safely would, and began collecting the fragments with a cloth she pulled from her apron pocket. Isabella watched with visible satisfaction. "See," she said to the room, "discipline is a gift. Not everyone has it." But something was wrong. The guests could feel it even if they couldn't name it. Because Mara's hands weren't shaking. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't performing apology with her body the way humiliated people do. That particular hunching, that shrinking, that desperate speed that says, "Please stop looking at me." Mara was cleaning broken glass the way a surgeon closes an incision, focused, unhurried, almost calm. Isabella noticed. The satisfaction on her face shifted, just slightly, into something else. Curiosity, or maybe the early flicker of irritation that comes when a performance isn't landing the way it was rehearsed. "Stand up," Isabella said. Mara stood up. "What's your name?" "Mara." "Mara," she said it like she was tasting something plain. "Tell me something, Mara. Have you ever been in a situation where you were genuinely out of your depth?" "Yes," Mara said. "And what did you do?" "I adapted." Isabella studied her. Then she laughed short and sharp, genuinely surprised. She turned back to the room. "My husband has always believed you can read a person's character by how they handle pressure." Her voice lifted slightly. "Victor is watching right now, actually, from the balcony." She said it without looking up, without needing to confirm it. "And I think he would agree with me that what we have here is an opportunity." The guests shifted. Some leaned in, some stepped back. "I want to make you a proposition, Mara." Isabella's voice was warm and precise, the way a blade can be both at once. "My security staff has been running a self-defense demonstration series for our guests. A bit of entertainment, charity component, very civilized." She smiled. "I've been told I'm not bad myself, and I think a small demonstration, you and I, might be rather instructive." The room murmured. Mara said nothing. "If you win," Isabella continued, "I'll make a $75,000 donation to any women's shelter of your choosing. In your name." She let that sit. "Then, if I win, you stand in front of this room and acknowledge that some people have no business pretending to be things they are not." It was a trap with no safe exit. Refusing would look like fear. Accepting meant walking into a room this woman controlled entirely. Mara understood in 2 seconds that Isabella had done this before. Not this exact situation, but this shape of situation. The engineered corner, the public witness. The terms designed so that even winning still costs you something. She also understood that refusing wasn't actually safe. Not with the man on the balcony watching. Not in a room full of people who had already laughed once tonight. Mara looked at Isabella Volkov, directly, for the first time. "All right," she said. Isabella's smile widened. "Wonderful." If you are new here and this story already has you locked in, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. There is a lot more where this came from. Now let's get back to Mara. The furniture moved fast. Security staff repositioned chairs with practiced efficiency. Guests formed a loose circle, the way crowds always do when they sense something real is about to happen. Champagne flutes were refilled. Someone handed Isabella a fresh glass. She took it, held it briefly, then passed it back, rolling her neck slowly, showing the room she was comfortable here. In her element. Mara removed her apron, folded it, set it on a chair. She unbuttoned the top button of her uniform collar. Then she stood in the center of the cleared space and waited. Isabella stepped forward. "You don't have to be afraid," she said quietly, "just for Mara." "I know," Mara said. Isabella came in fast, hard and quick. A combination that had clearly worked for her before. Sharp, precise, trained, nothing amateur about it. She was good. Mara stepped to the outside, redirected the momentum, and let Isabella carry herself half a step past center. A few guests made sounds. Isabella reset, came again, more controlled this time, probing. Mara gave ground just enough, pivoted. The crowd watched her move and started to feel something they couldn't explain. Isabella was attacking like she expected resistance. Mara wasn't resisting. She was absorbing and redirecting, the way water doesn't fight a stone. it just finds the path around it. "Stop moving," Isabella said through her teeth. Mara didn't answer. Isabella lunged. Mara stepped inside the reach and landed a single precise strike to the center of her chest. Not a punch, something flatter, more structural. Isabella stumbled. The gasp from the crowd was involuntary. Isabella straightened immediately. Her face had changed. The performance was gone. Something rower had replaced it. She lunged again, wild this time, and Mara didn't redirect. She stepped, pivoted, used the full momentum, and took Isabella down in a controlled fall. Not a slam, a guided drop, and pinned her with leverage she had learned in rooms very different from this one. The room went completely silent. Mara's forearm rested just beneath Isabella Volkov's jaw, not pressing, just present, a fact. Isabella's chest was heaving. Her pinned hair had come loose on one side. She was looking up at Mara, and her expression moved through several emotions at once: fury, shock, and underneath both of those, something that looked almost like the beginning of respect, though she would never have called it that. Mara held the position for 3 seconds. Then she released, stood, took 2 steps back. "Do you want help up?" she asked. Isabella said nothing. Mara walked back to the chair where she'd left her apron, picked it up, tied it back around her waist, and began collecting the abandoned champagne flutes from the nearest table. No smirk, no triumph, just routine. Isabella was helped up by her security staff. She didn't look at the room. She looked at Mara's back, and her jaw was tight in a way that had nothing to do with the hold that had just been released from it. On the balcony above, barely visible through the glass, a man in a dark suit watched without expression. Viktor Volkov had the face of someone who had seen many things and catalogued every single one. He watched Mara move through the room, efficient, quiet, unremarkable to anyone who hadn't just watched what she'd done. Then he turned to the man standing beside him. "Find out who she is," he said. His voice was calm, not threatening, almost curious, the way a collector speaks when he spots something he doesn't yet have. Mara's alarm went off at 4:45 in the morning. She didn't groan, she didn't hit snooze. She sat up in the dark the way people do when sleep has always been something functional, a system reboot, nothing more. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled permanently of old cooking and someone else's laundry detergent. 1 bedroom, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, a window that looked out onto a brick wall. She made coffee, drank it standing at the counter, and was out the door by 5:15. The bakery was 4 blocks away. She walked it without headphones. Most people her age didn't do that anymore, but Mara liked the silence. She had learned a long time ago that silence was information. Footsteps behind you, a car idling too long, a door opening when it shouldn't. Silence told you things that music drowned out. The bakery was owned by a man named Desmond, 62 years old, flour permanently embedded in the creases of his hands. He had never once asked Mara a personal question in 3 months of working together. She respected him enormously for that. She shaped dough, loaded trays, ran the register when the morning rush came in. By noon she was done. She walked home, slept for 90 minutes, and was at her second job, janitorial work in an office building downtown, by 3. Evenings, when the bookings came in, she did event catering. 3 jobs, overlapping just enough to leave no gap where someone might ask too many questions. No single employer knew enough about her to build a picture. She paid bills in cash where she could. Her phone was registered to an address she no longer lived at. No social media, no neighborhood events, no building meetings. She had built an invisible life, deliberately, carefully. For 2 years it had worked. The phone started buzzing that afternoon while she was trying to sleep. Unknown number, she let it ring. 20 minutes later, different number, same pattern, 3 rings, stop, call back from a new line. She knew what that pattern meant. She had used it herself once, in a different life. She turned the phone face down and closed her eyes, but she didn't sleep. Instead, her mind went back, the way it always did when she couldn't rest. Back to the concrete floor and the chain-link walls and the lights that were always too bright, the kind that don't allow shadows, the kind that don't let you hide anything, not even from yourself. She had been 22, the first time she fought on the underground circuit. She used the word circuit loosely, because there was nothing professional about it, no regulation, no medical staff at ringside, no contract that would hold up in any court, just the fights, the money, and the men who managed both with the casual ease of people who had never once considered that the bodies in the ring were attached to lives outside it. They called her Rook. She hadn't chosen the name. Someone else assigned it the way nicknames in those circles were always assigned, based on something they observed. In chess, the rook moves in straight lines. No feinting, no curves. It goes exactly where it's going and removes whatever is in the way. Someone told her this once, explaining why the name fit. She never decided whether it was a compliment. Cal Dorsey found her the way he found most of his fighters, at the bottom of something. In her case, a street-level gym in the industrial quarter. She had been training herself badly for 8 months, working out the kind of anger that has nowhere else to go. Her mother had died the year before, left her with nothing except a small debt, an apartment she couldn't afford, and the particular grief of losing the one person who always told you things would get better. Cal was 60 then, ex-professional boxer. His face had absorbed so much damage over the years that it had settled into a permanent expression of patient endurance. He watched her work the bag for 10 minutes. Then, without introduction, he said, "You're wasting power by leading with your shoulder. Everything comes from the hip. You know that. You're just ignoring it." She told him to mind his business. He laughed, bought her a coffee from the machine by the door, and they talked for 2 hours. By the end of it, she had a trainer. Cal never pushed her toward the circuit. That was important to understand. He trained her because she wanted to fight, and he believed that if someone was going to fight, they should at least do it correctly. The circuit was her decision. The rent was real. The gap between what she earned and what she owed needed to be bridged by something. For 4 years she was Rook. She won more than she lost. She was never the crowd favorite, never the fighter people came specifically to see. She was the fighter that other fighters didn't want to draw. Efficient, patient, difficult to read, she didn't perform, she just fought. And then she won a match she wasn't supposed to win. The man who had bet heavily against her was named Gregor, and Gregor was the kind of man whose losses became other people's problems. He couldn't touch her directly. She had loose protection through the circuit's informal social code. But Cal had no such protection. Cal was an old trainer who lived alone and walked to the gym every morning at 6. Same route, every day, for 30 years. They broke 3 of his ribs and his left knee on a Tuesday morning in November. He spent 6 weeks in the hospital. He walked with a cane after that. Mara paid the medical bills with the last of her savings. Then she sat in Cal's hospital room for 2 hours without saying much. Cal was drugged and tired and not inclined toward sentimentality even at the best of times. But at one point he looked at her and said, "Don't do anything stupid." "I'm not going to," she said. "I know that look, Mara. I'm not going to do anything." A pause. "I'm going to disappear." Cal looked at her for a long moment. "That's not the same as being safe." "No," she agreed quietly. "But it's close enough." She left the city 3 weeks later. New name on the work records, not legally changed, just quietly shifted. New city, new jobs. She built the invisible life slowly, carefully. No shortcuts, no ornamentation, just function. 2 years. And then a champagne flute. And a white gown. And a room full of people watching. If this story is hitting different for you right now, go ahead and drop a comment. Tell us, what do you think of Mara so far? We read every single one. Now let's keep going. She was still staring at the ceiling thinking about all of this when the knock came. Not a phone call, an actual knock on her door. Which was worse, because it meant someone had her address. She didn't move immediately. She listened first. No breathing she could hear through the door, no shifting weight on the other side. She stood slowly, moved to the side of the door rather than directly in front of it, and said, "Who is it?" Nobody dangerous, a man's voice, older, a slight accent she couldn't immediately place. "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed, "it isn't. My name is Petrov. I work for Viktor Volkov. He would like to speak with you." "About what?" He didn't specify. In my experience, that means he wants to do the specifying himself. Mara stood quietly for a moment. She was calculating. Not whether to be afraid, that was already a settled question. She was calculating the geometry of the situation. Viktor Volkov sending one man to knock politely rather than 3 men to create pressure, that was information. The politeness was information. The fact that he had waited until the day after rather than the night of, that was information too. "Tell him I'm not interested in employment," she said. A pause on the other side. "I'll pass that along. He may still want to talk. Then he can ask again." She heard footsteps move away down the hallway. She stayed where she was for another full minute. Then she moved to the window and watched the street below until a dark car pulled away from the curb. She noted the plates, filed it, did nothing else with it. She went back to the kitchen, poured her cold coffee down the drain, made a fresh cup. Her hands were steady. They were always steady. Cal used to say, the most dangerous fighters aren't the ones who don't feel fear. They're the ones who feel it and don't let it run the motor. Fear is a passenger, not the driver. She was still at the counter when her phone buzzed. This time she recognized the number. The bakery, Desmond. "Mara," his voice was tight. "Someone put a brick through the front window last night. There's paint on the door too. Police are coming, but I don't understand what this is about. Do you know what this is about?" She closed her eyes, just briefly. "I'm sorry, Desmond," she said. "I don't know who did it." The first part was true. She hung up. 2 hours later, her janitorial supervisor called. Services no longer required. Restructuring, he said. He sounded uncomfortable. She thanked him and hung up. Then the call she had been expecting. The voice was smooth and controlled. She recognized it immediately, even though she had only heard it speak a handful of sentences. "Mara," Isabella Volkov said, "I hope you're having a productive morning." Mara said nothing. "You embarrassed me," Isabella continued. Her voice was pleasant, the way a room can look pleasant before you notice the locks on the doors. "In my home, in front of people who matter to me. You understand that's not something I simply let pass." "I understand that's what you've decided," Mara said. A short silence. "There are people around you, people you seem to care about." Mara's jaw tightened, just slightly. "Think carefully," Isabella said, "about how much further you want this to go." The line went quiet. Then dead. Mara set the phone down on the counter. She thought about Cal in his care facility 3 states away, his bad knee, his morning routine, the man at the front desk who was supposed to monitor visitors. She thought about Desmond sweeping broken glass off the floor of his bakery at 6 in the morning, and not understanding why. She thought about disappearing again. She knew how. She had done it before. And then she heard Cal's voice in her head, from that hospital bed, 8 years ago, 3 broken ribs, face the color of old paper. That's not the same as being safe. She picked the phone back up. She dialed the number Isabella had called from. It rang twice. "Tell me where," Mara said, when the line connected. The warehouse was in the Port District, where the city stops pretending to be civilized and just becomes what it actually is, concrete and rust, the smell of salt water mixed with diesel, buildings that have no interest in being looked at. Isabella had sent the address in a text, no words, just coordinates, which told Mara that she had done this kind of thing before and had learned to keep the paper trail minimal. Mara arrived 20 minutes early. She always arrived early. She walked the perimeter first, loading dock on the south side, 2 vehicle entrances, a row of high windows along the east wall letting in flat rectangles of afternoon light. She checked every exit the way she always checked exits, not with urgency, just with the quiet attention of someone who understands that knowing where the doors are is not paranoia. It is simply intelligence. She found a secondary exit behind a stack of pallets on the north wall, noted it, didn't move anything. She was standing near the center of the main floor when Isabella arrived. No security this time, no silk gown, no champagne. Isabella was wearing dark-fitted clothes, her hair down, and she moved through the entrance with the energy of someone who had spent the last 24 hours in a very specific kind of controlled fury, the kind that has been compressed and organized into something purposeful. She looked more honest than she had at the gala. Stripped of the performance, she was simply a dangerous person. That was actually easier to work with than the theater. Isabella didn't speak. She crossed the floor and attacked. No preamble, no terms, no audience to perform for, just movement, hard and immediate and loaded with 24 hours of humiliation behind it. This was different from the ballroom. Mara had known it would be. At the gala there had been a crowd, and a crowd changes everything. It introduces theater. Theater introduces restraint, and restraint is a leash on both people in a fight. Here there was no leash. Isabella came in with the full weight of her anger, and it made her faster and more reckless in equal measure. Mara took the first strike on her forearm, deflected rather than blocked, and felt the real force behind it. She recalibrated instantly. This was not a demonstration. This was not a point being made for witnesses. This was a woman trying to take something back. Mara stopped redirecting. She fought the way Cal had spent 4 years teaching her to fight when the situation genuinely required it. Not the patient deflection of the ballroom, but direct, structural efficiency. The kind that ends things cleanly. She absorbed an attack, found the opening it created and used it. Isabella was trained and she was fierce, and under different circumstances she would have been a serious problem for almost anyone. But she was fighting emotionally. And emotional fighting telegraphs. The body announces what the mind has decided, half a second before it executes, and that half second is everything. 3 exchanges. 4. Isabella landed a strike across Mara's cheekbone that would bruise by morning. The world tilted slightly. She tasted copper, felt the sharp clarity of real pain cutting through the operational calm, not breaking it, just reminding her that the calm was a choice rather than an absence. She chose it again. On the 5th exchange, she took Isabella down. Not gently this time, not the guided fall of the ballroom. A controlled, decisive takedown that put Isabella flat on the warehouse floor with Mara's weight distributed across her in the specific geometry that made resistance not just difficult, but structurally pointless. Isabella went still. Her breathing was ragged, her cheek pressed against the cold concrete, one arm pinned, the other technically free but functionally useless from this angle, and she understood that. She stopped trying to use it after 2 seconds, which meant she was still thinking clearly even now. Mara noted that and respected it. The warehouse was very quiet. Somewhere outside a ship's horn sounded, long and low, and then faded into nothing. Finish it. Isabella's voice was compressed, slightly distorted by the position. But the words were completely clear. If you're going to do it, do it. Mara stayed exactly where she was. She thought about Cal's face in that hospital bed. She thought about the brick through Desmond's window. She thought about the care facility and the man at the front desk, and whether he had actually been monitoring visitors the way he was supposed to. She thought about what it would mean to finish it, the immediate relief, the silence that would follow, the particular piece of a threat permanently removed. And then she thought about what she would have to become to do that. What room she would have to walk into inside herself and decide to live in permanently. She had made this exact calculation before, in a different warehouse, in a different city, standing over a man named Gregor who had hurt Cal and who was at that moment completely unconscious and entirely within her reach. She had stood there for a long time, and then she had walked away. Not because she was afraid, not because she lacked the capability, but because she understood, with the cold clarity that sometimes arrives in extreme moments, that becoming the thing that broke you is not survival. It is just a different kind of destruction. She released the pressure slightly. "Listen to me," Mara said. Her voice was quiet, even, no anger in it at all. "If anything happens to the people around me, the old man in the care facility, the bakery owner, anyone connected to me in any way, I will find you, and I will not stop. Not because I'm angry, because I'll have nothing left to protect, and that makes a person very uncomplicated." She held the position one more second. Then she stood. She stepped back, picked up her jacket from the pallet near the entrance, and walked toward the door without hurrying, without looking back, already somewhere else in her mind. Behind her, she heard Isabella push herself up off the concrete floor. She didn't turn around. She walked out into the Port District afternoon. Flat gray light, salt and rust in the air. She kept walking until the warehouse was 2 blocks behind her. Then she stopped, leaned against a chain-link fence, and let herself feel the shake she had been holding back for the last 40 minutes. The fine tremor that lives in the hands and the jaw when adrenaline has been managed rather than released. She breathed through it slowly. Let it move. Let it settle. Let it pass. Then she straightened and walked to the bus stop and went home. The vandalism stopped. It stopped the way things stop when someone with real authority decides they should, completely, immediately, without explanation. The morning after the warehouse, nothing. The morning after that, nothing. Desmond called to tell her the repairs to his window had been paid for anonymously, full cost, cash, delivered in an envelope through his mail slot with no note. He sounded bewildered. She told him she was glad and she meant every word of it. Cal's care facility sent a letter. His outstanding medical balance had been settled by an anonymous donor. Account clear. She read it 3 times standing in her kitchen. Then she sat down at her small table and put her face in her hands. Not crying. Just receiving. Just letting the relief be real. Her janitorial position was quietly reinstated. No explanation offered. None requested. She was working the early shift at the bakery when the message came. No name, a rooftop address. A time and 3 words. If you're willing. She was willing. The rooftop was on a building in the financial district, 40 floors up. The entire city spread out below like a circuit board lit from within. Viktor Volkov was already there when she arrived, standing at the railing, hands in his coat pockets, looking out at the city the way people look at things they have known for a very long time. He was taller than she had registered from across the ballroom, late 50s, close-cut gray hair, and the particular stillness of someone who learned very early that stillness is its own kind of power. He didn't turn when she came through the roof access door. He waited until she had crossed to within a few feet of him. Then he turned and looked at her with the same expression he'd worn on the balcony that first night, assessing, without performance. "You didn't finish it," he said, not a question. "No," she said. "Why not?" Because she was finished enough. He considered that, let it sit, then. I had you investigated after the gala. I assumed you would. Rook, he said, and he watched her face carefully. She gave him nothing. 4 years on the underground circuit, he continued. 12 wins, 2 losses, 1 draw that most people who saw it thought you actually won. He turned back to the view. You walked away from that world to protect an old man who trained you. And then you walked away from the life you rebuilt here to protect the same man again. He was quiet for a moment. That kind of loyalty is either a weakness or a foundation. I've been trying to decide which. What did you decide? She said. Foundation, he said. People who walk into warehouses alone don't have weaknesses. They have reasons. The city moved below them, a siren somewhere distant already fatting. I'm going to be direct with you, Victor said. He turned to face her fully. I could use someone with your particular set of skills, not as security, not as staff. He paused, something more consultative. Someone who moves through rooms without being noticed. Someone who understands leverage in more than one sense. I'm not for hire, Mara said. I know that. No offense in his voice. None at all. I'm not offering employment. I'm offering neutrality. You live your life. I don't involve myself in it. The people around you remain undisturbed. In exchange, if I ever need a specific kind of conversation facilitated, you consider it. Case by case, nothing more. And if I decline a request, she said. Then you decline it, he said simply. I'm not in the business of coercing people who have already demonstrated the cost of that approach. Myra looked at him for a long moment. It was not a clean offer. No arrangement that touched Viktor Volkov's world was ever going to be clean, but it was real, and it was mutual, and it was built on the one currency she had always found more reliable than money or fear. Respect. I'll consider requests, she said. Case by case. He nodded once. That's all I'm asking. They stood there a moment longer, the city below them vast and indifferent and full of its own layered arrangements of power and survival. Then Mara turned and walked back toward the roof access door. One more thing, Victor said behind her. She stopped, didn't turn. The 75,000, he said, the shelter donation. I've arranged it in your name as agreed. The original terms stand, regardless of everything that came after. She was still for a moment. Then she nodded once, not to him, just to the air in front of her, and walked through the door. Months passed. Cal's knee was never going to be what it was, but he walked without the cane on good days now. He had a new group of young fighters he was training at a gym near the care facility. He called Mara every Sunday evening at 7 o'clock. She was always near her phone at 7 on Sundays. She never mentioned this to him. Desmond's bakery got a write-up in a local food column, busier than it had ever been. He hired 2 new staff. He still never asked Mara personal questions. She appreciated him more for it every single day. And then one evening in late autumn, an invitation arrived. White envelope, heavy card stock, a charity gala, different organization, different venue, same world. Her name was on the envelope, not a title, not a role designation, just her name. Mara Ellis. She set it on her kitchen counter and looked at it for 2 days. Then she made a decision. She wore dark green. Nothing elaborate, she had no interest in elaborate, but clean and fitted and chosen. The kind of clothing that says I decided on this rather than I am trying to be something. She did her own hair, which took longer than she expected. She stood in front of the small mirror in her bathroom and looked at herself for a moment. The bruise from the warehouse had long faded. The face looking back at her was the same one it had always been, unremarkable at first glance, containing more history than it advertised. She took the bus. The venue was a renovated exhibition hall, high ceilings, warm light. The crowd was the same kind of crowd, money and power dressed up as philanthropy. The eternal performance of people who have decided that having things obligates them to be seen giving some of them away. She knew this world now. She had moved through it as a ghost, and now she moved through it as herself, which was different in ways she was still measuring. No one announced her arrival, no fanfare, no formal recognition. She took a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray, not champagne. She never drank at events and stood near the edge of the room, and simply existed in it. But people noticed. Not all of them, not obviously, but the ones who had been at the gala, or who had heard the story filtered through 3 or 4 retellings, or who simply had the social awareness to feel shifts in a room's invisible architecture. They noticed her the way you notice a change in air pressure, not loudly, just with the body's quiet awareness that something in the environment has shifted. She didn't return the attention. She wasn't there to be seen. She was there because she had decided she was allowed to be. And the difference between those two things, that was the whole point. Across the room she caught a brief glimpse of Viktor Volkov near the bar. He saw her at the same moment. He raised his glass slightly, not a toast, just an acknowledgement, and returned to his conversation. She looked away and watched the room. There is a kind of power that announces itself constantly, because it is afraid that if it stops announcing, it will cease to exist. It fills rooms with its voice. It arranges its own visibility. It needs other people watching to feel real. And then there is another kind. The kind that was built in concrete rooms and 445 alarms, and the discipline of someone who had to learn, the hard way, the difference between survival and performance. The kind that doesn't need the room to confirm it. The kind that walked into a ballroom as catering staff and walked out having changed the temperature of the entire building, and then caught the bus home, made coffee, set her alarm, and did it all again the next day. Mara Ellis stood in the warm light of the exhibition hall, water glass in hand, watching the room with the quiet attention of someone who had long ago stopped needing to be the loudest thing in it. She wasn't trying to intimidate anyone. She didn't need to. Power isn't loud. It doesn't beg for witnesses. It doesn't humiliate. It waits. And when necessary, it acts. If this story moved you, if Mara's journey hit something real, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second and it means everything to this channel. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this one, and drop a comment below. Tell us the one moment in this story that stayed with you. Was it the ballroom, the warehouse, or that final image of Mara walking in as a guest? We read every single comment, everyone. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. That means more than you know.